Have you had to do a lot of work to counteract the potential consequences of that wiring as you become an adult and a father and all of those things? It's something I think about a lot. I think I've got my own pretty fucked up wiring, and I'm scared now because I'm on the footsteps of becoming a dad myself. I'm with a partner, been with her for 4 years. We're talking about kids right now, and I think, Jesus Christ, like you almost can foresee that there's a really high possibility I'm going to fuck up as a dad because my brain is wired towards like validation and
Hmm.
work, career success, and I'm a bit of a workaholic. And so, have you had to do a lot of work on that?
Absolutely. So the first thing I'll say is you will fuck up as a dad. We will all fuck up as parents. The question is, how big will we fuck them up? And I'm working very hard to make sure that the way that I fuck up my kids is in small ways that they can fix in small ways. But I already know, like, the sins of the father pass on. So I'm just trying to minimize what I pass on that's negative and maximize what I pass on that's positive. The additional layer that is unique to myself and all professional intelligence officers is that when we are recruited into intelligence service, specifically when CIA recruits field operators, it's fairly transparent. They tell you that you were recruited because you are a little fucked up. They tell you that you were recruited because of a certain psychological profile that makes it so that you pragmatically view things like secrets and lies. There's a few different terms. We call it moral flexibility. Depending on the situation, there are some things that I would deem immoral, but to do them in a different situation is totally acceptable. And that's just something that I'm wired to be, that's been wired in me since I was a kid. But CIA understands how to take advantage of that, how to use that in a way that benefits American national security. There's also an element of high performance that comes from being wired a certain way. So there is a tie between childhood trauma and high performance. It's a documented connection, but CIA has learned, as has MI6 and Mossad and all the other intelligence services of the world, they've learned that when you train someone who has just the right amount of childhood trauma high performance, when you get your hands on them at the right time in the right period of their life, they can be trained to become extremely loyal, highly productive field operators that end up spending 30 plus years in service to their nation.
When did they get their hands on you?
They recruited me when I was 27 years old, coming out of the military in 2007. I was looking for whatever the next step was going to be. And that was when I was approached by a CIA recruiter.
I heard that you got a pop-up on your computer screen.
Yeah, back in the day, I was actually applying. I was a nuclear missile officer for the CIA, or excuse me, I was a nuclear missile officer for the Air Force. And a nuclear missile officer in the Air Force controls nuclear ICBMs. So I wore the little ring.
Wait. What's a nuclear ICBM?
So a nuclear ICBM is a nuclear intercontinental ballistic missile. So the large missiles that carry nuclear warheads for mutually assured destruction, nuclear war type of stuff.
So you controlled the nuclear missiles?
I was half of who controlled them. I wore one ring, somebody else wore a different ring, and that was how a nuclear missile got launched.
What does the ring do?
So the ring is a key. On the end of it is a key, and when you get a nuclear code that comes in, the code, you put it into an old school computer system, and the two of you take your key ring and you insert it into the silo operating system, and then you turn in unison. And when you turn in unison, it launches a nuclear weapon.
How did you get yourself to the point in life at 27 years old where you're holding a nuclear key around your neck?
I would love to say it was a series of good decisions, but it wasn't. I did what I was told. That's how I got there. I did what I was told when I was in high school, and I got good grades. And then my mom told me that the best school of all the universities that chose me, the best school I should go to is the Air Force Academy. So then I accepted a full ride scholarship to the United States Air Force Academy, where I did what I was told, and I graduated as a lieutenant. And then I followed what the Air Force told me to do from there. And they told me to learn how to fly. And then they told me that they needed me to work in nuclear and space weapons instead. So then I went to that school and I did well at that school. And I ended up just kind of climbing the ladder. I did what I was told. And then one day I found myself 100 feet underground, miserable. It's a horrible job.
Why?
You're so in 2007, when I was a nuclear missile officer, you sit in a launch control capsule, an LCC, that sits 100 feet underground, and you sit there on a 72-hour shift with one other person, the other person who holds the other key, and then you are one nuclear crew of maybe 30 different nuclear crews who are all on deployment at the same time. So at any given time in one Air Force base, there's 60-ish people underground for 72 hours at a time. And then in a different missile base, there'll be a different 60 people underground. And your whole job is just to sit there and wait for a nuclear war to break out. And obviously, nuclear war hasn't broken out, and hopefully it never will break out. So as you sit there underground, not seeing sunlight, and as you sit there in a capsule with one other person that you very rarely ever like, you have a lot of time to reflect on what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I'm a redundancy of a redundancy of a scenario that we all are working very hard to make sure never happens. Is this a productive life? Like, am I making a difference? Am I leaving a mark in history, sitting here, not launching missiles, waiting for a message to come in that I already know isn't going to lead to nuclear war? It's a very difficult and thankless job that even right now, as you and I are having this conversation, there are some 200 Americans sitting underground doing that exact job. And that's just in the United States. Every country that has nuclear weapons is doing the same thing.
If an order had come in that instructed you to launch a nuclear weapon, would you have done it?
Absolutely. That's what you do. The other thing that's important to understand is we're redundancies of redundancies. So we don't know if an order says to launch nuclear weapons. We just know that an order comes in that says to insert the keys and turn them. And if it's a valid order that comes in, then the machine will let us insert our keys. We will turn our keys, and then the machine will do what the machine does. Sometimes that order that's coming in is saying launch nuclear missiles. Sometimes that order that's coming in is just a drill to make sure that the two people in the capsule turn their keys.
Oh, really? So you never know the difference?
We're just a redundancy of a redundancy, man.
It seems hard to me to understand how someone would stay in that job for a long period of time. So they must have like really high attrition.
They have shockingly low attrition because they do such a good job of psychologically identifying the right people for that job.
Were they scouting you, do you think, from a very early age to eventually go into the CIA?
No, I don't believe so. I think CIA is far too practical to do anything that requires scouting people from a young age. I think what more realistically happened is that they had a very simple algorithm.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
That they had applied to every government website, so that when people of a certain profile applied to a job on a government website, then they'd get a flash on their screen, just like I did, that said, hey, we appreciate your application. We'd like to have a different recruiter contact you for a different opportunity.
What were you applying for on that government website when that pop-up came up?
Yeah, I was applying for the Peace Corps. I was trying to get into the US Peace Corps because after spending 2 years underground, waiting to launch nuclear missiles, I thought that it'd be great to get out of the Air Force and go do the exact opposite. Kind of like if you've ever had a really bad breakup, you go looking for the exact opposite of the person you just broke up with. That's how I felt.
And the Peace Corps does sort of humanitarian work around the world.
Exactly right. I mean, I was looking to teach children English in Africa, or save orphans, or do microfinance, or build huts. Like, I was looking to do something that built the world up, instead of just waiting to tear the world down.
You get this pop-up as you're applying and it says, another recruiter wants to speak to you or something, words to that effect. What happens then?
So that's when being a 27-year-old single guy kicks in, and you think to yourself, there might be something better. So once you think to yourself, there might be something better, it's really easy to say, yes, like, I'll wait. And that's all the screen was asking me to do, is just pause my application for 72 hours. So it's easy to click yes, And then you fall out of that website and you're just on hold for 72 hours. Either a better opportunity is going to happen and someone's going to call me, or no one's going to call me and I can come right back and finish my application. But just to say no means to miss the opportunity. And that wasn't me.
And then within 72 hours, you get a call, presumably?
Within 24 hours, I got a call. Yeah, I got a call from an unlisted number. It just said 703. And there was a woman on the other end of the line. She gave me a first name, but I don't remember what her first name was. And she basically, confirmed who I was and confirmed that I was applying to the Peace Corps, asked me if I'd be open for other government opportunities. And then she said that there might be opportunities in the national security sector that I'd be interested in. And she'd like to send me an airline ticket and a hotel reservation and a rental car reservation to come up to DC to hear more about the job.
What did you think at that point?
I thought it was a prank call. I thought that the call wasn't real. I thought that the call was, maybe it was some kind of gimmick, or maybe it was something else, or it just didn't sound real. Especially not when she said she was going to send me a paper airline ticket and she was going to send me all this stuff in the mail overnight FedEx. But then it showed up. And then when it showed up, again, that 27-year-old single male kicked in and I was like, well, now I have a ticket. Let's see where the ticket goes. And let's go to the reservation counter at the rental car desk. And is this a real rental car reservation? It's a real reservation. Is there a real hotel? And then you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs.
The rental car reservation's real. The airline ticket's real. You fly out there. You land.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next?
You get another phone call that says, hey, did you get in safe? And then they tell you the address for where you're supposed to show up the next day. And then you go, it's a nondescript building, and you walk in. And for me, I walked in, there were 10 or so other people in the waiting room. None of us really knew what we were there for. We all knew that we were there for something related to a government job. Everybody's dressed essentially the same way. And, you find out that this person's in finance and that lady came from social work and whatever else it might be. And then eventually somebody comes out and calls you into a room, and then you go through what we call the first round of interviews. And it's just kind of like a fit to see what you're interested in, what you're not interested in, et cetera. And it was at the end of that first interview that the lady said to me that I might be a good fit for the National Clandestine Service at CIA, which I didn't know what that was at the time. And then she basically broke it down, and she was just like you and I did at the beginning of this conversation. She was like, essentially, we want you to be a field officer, or what you might know from the movies as a spy. And of course, for me, my 7-year-old self was like, I'm going to be a what? Like, you want me to be a spy? You want me to drive fancy cars and wear tuxedos and always have a beautiful woman on my side? Like, sign me up for that. Starving children in Africa can wait. I want to do that. But then of course comes the byline afterwards where she's like, you can't tell anybody that this is what you're now applying for. We're going to move you on to the second phase of interviews. We need you to, go back to your hotel and go back to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana and live your normal life. And if anybody asks you why you're out here, just tell them that you came out here applying for a government position and you don't know whether or not you're going to get it. And in the meantime, we'll be in touch.
And then they get in touch again.
And then you go through multiple more rounds of interviews. So they fly you usually back to the DC area, and then the interviews just get kind of more intense. You go from a fit interview to a kind of like a test, like a interview that's more of like a test with somebody else. They ask you scenario-based questions. They give you puzzles. They ask you some light psychological stuff.
When you got that letter in the post saying that you'd been offered a role, how did you feel?
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah. I felt like I had done everything right. I felt like, there was a part of me that says, and I still kind of follow this mantra, like, who gets to do this? So that felt amazing. And then there was a ton, to use your word, a ton of validation. Of course, like, now I get it. Now I know why I went to a college I didn't like. Now I know why I put up with a stepdad and listened to my mom, and I don't need love, and you don't need support, and you don't need a family that cares about you as a person. All you need is to check the fucking boxes, because this is where you get to go when you check the boxes. And now that I've checked all the boxes, I'm free. Except it doesn't really work that way, because when you're hired because you check boxes, the boxes just change, but you still have to check the boxes.
And at that point, it goes from interview to, I guess, training.
Correct.
During that whole interview process, you're not allowed to tell anyone, I'm guessing.
Right.
Even your family?
Nope.
So what do you tell your family that you've been up to during that period?
So this is what's nice about their recruitment process. Remember, I told you earlier that I I accepted as a child that there are times that you have to lie and there are secrets that you have to keep. This was just a secret I had to keep and a lie that I had to tell. So I told my family that I was looking at getting out of the Air Force. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Maybe I'd go work for the government. And I was going to DC to do some government interviews. I was never close to my family. From the time I left for the Air Force Academy at 18, I mean, I went home maybe once a year. Every time I tried to go home, it was always a kerfluffle because my parents didn't want to buy the airline ticket because it was expensive and I didn't have money to buy an airline ticket. So I had to ask them. And it was the same song and dance every Christmas holiday, right? Like, I'd like to come home. I don't have any money. Well, we don't have any money either. Maybe you shouldn't come home. So it was really easy to be 27 years old. Almost 10 years after that, I'm not really close to my family. So I tell them as little as possible. I had a girlfriend at the time. She was a great girlfriend, but she wasn't as great as being a CIA officer was going to be, right? I had friends at the time, but they weren't as cool as being a CIA officer would be, right? So it was really easy to just start just cutting off the branches of my social tree because I was going to go do something awesome. I didn't need anybody else.
Did the CIA tell you to disconnect from these people at all?
They told you that you would have to eventually, and they explain how you're going to go into covert service. If you're going to go into clandestine service, you can't take a whole Rolodex of people with you. So one of the things that they asked during our psychological evaluation was, how much do you need close relationships and close peers? And how do you feel about severing ties with what we sometimes call like secondary or tertiary relationships, friends, college friends? Like a primary relationship is your spouse. A secondary relationship is all your close friends. A tertiary relationship is somebody who you work with. So like, how do you feel about cutting off all those not so important relationships? And for me, it was easy, right? I was like, let's go. I'm going to go do something amazing. I don't need college friends to go do something amazing.
Do you think your appearance and ethnicity factored into the CIA's decision to recruit you?
Absolutely. In 2007, so just to take everybody back, 2007 was 6 years after 9/11. It was 3 years after the CIA 9/11 Commission, or the US government 9/11 Commission, came out, which basically said that everything CIA had been doing up to 2001 was wrong. They were focused in a Cold War era. They were not focused on terrorism. They were focused on Ivy League Caucasian graduates as being the next generation of CIA officer, instead of diversifying for a diversified world. So without a doubt, they were looking for different people. They were looking for young people, colored people, LGBTQ plus, people who could connect with the modern day threat around the world. And then I think on top of being brown and ethnic, I also came with a huge government file because I had been part of the Air Force since I was 18 years old. So they knew everything about my health, everything about my mental health, everything about my academic, athletic performance in college. They knew everything about me. And I think that's part of why my onboarding process took about 9 months, where the typical onboarding process takes about 18 months.
How do they train you to become a CIA agent?
So a lot of the training part is classified still, so I can't talk about it. But there's a school that we go to. It's fairly publicly known, but I can't acknowledge what it is and isn't. And we go there for many months. And we basically were pulled out of everyday life and we're put into a controlled, simulated world. And inside that simulated world, they kind of control what's happening around us. So if you can imagine, almost like going from being taken out of your apartment where you live, and now you're put into a different apartment, but the apartment that you're put into is part of a giant game. And somebody else controls all the game. So they control the news that's on the TV, and they control the cars that are on the road, and they control everything except the weather, basically, so that they can create multiple different types of scenarios where you exercise the skills that they taught you, from driving to first aid response, to lying, living and working under alias identities, all that stuff. So you're put into a very controlled environment for a long period of time where they can test all of your tradecraft that you're taught.
It's very expensive. It must be very expensive for them to train a CIA agent.
Right. That's why they train us in batches. So there's generally 2 to 3 batches a year that go through different types of training. And there's different classifications of officers too, right? So your analysts are different than your technical officers, who are different than your field officers. So what they'll do is they'll batch you into, or at least what they did in 2007, is they would batch you along with your discipline and then send a batch to training. And then everybody goes through the same lectures during the day, just like university. And everybody goes through a series of exercises at different times of the day and different times of the week. But essentially, everybody goes through the same curriculum and everybody has the same grades. And then those grades are all measured against each other, and the bottom performers are cut out and the top performers get to stay.